Good afternoon. My name is Preet Bharara, and I'm the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. We are seeing in this country an absolute epidemic of abusive debt collection practices. That is why today we unsealed charges against Williams, Scott & Associates, or WSA, a so-called debt collection company located in Norcross, Georgia, also its owner and 6 of its employees for allegedly engaging in the worst kind of abusive and threatening conduct in an effort to collect debts from average Americans. WSA found its victims by purchasing uncollected debt cheap, cents on the dollar, with no intention of collecting on the debt through legitimate means. As alleged, the defendants, third-party debt collectors acting under the guise of government authority, illegally and repeatedly threatened arrest, prosecution, and prison for countless Americans. They even threatened to take away victims' driver's licenses. As further alleged, in order to credibly threaten prosecution and prison, the defendants pretended to be law enforcement officials, alternately claiming to be part of the Department of Justice, the Department of State, the Marshal Service, and even a completely fabricated government task force. The evidence shows that the defendants targeted and harassed over time more than 6,000 victims and made over $4.1 million through their abusive tactics. And now, after years of falsely threatening arrest, these defendants are the ones who now find themselves in handcuffs, facing the loss of their own liberty. At the outset, let me make clear that those who owe legitimate debts should pay them, and there is, of course, nothing inherently wrong with trying to collect legitimate debts. But at the same time, the law imposes reasonable boundaries, and Americans who may owe a debt should be free from terrorizing, extortionate, and deceptive efforts to collect them. We don't allow the mob to do it, and we don't allow so-called debt collection agencies to do it either. As detailed in the complaint, WSA employees told lie after outrageous lie, and they were ruthlessly persistent. When questioned by scared and skeptical consumers, the defendants responded with even more lies and more false threats. Indeed, the complaint reads like a tale from Dickensian times when people could be dragged off to debtor's prison. There are some examples on the chart to my right. As outlined in the complaint, in one example, according to a script that was discovered during a search of the premises, people who worked at WSA were supposed to say, "Who are we? We are a government task force set up to investigate and collect info on individuals involved in depository account fraud," whatever that is. In another call that was recorded and collected by law enforcement, someone said, "This isn't a collection matter, you're dealing with charges." In another instance, similarly, according to a script, people were advised to tell folks who they were trying to collect debts from that felony warrants would be activated, and any existing driver's license will be suspended effective immediately. In another call that was captured, one of the defendants said, "You're facing 5 years imprisonment on these charges." And perhaps my personal favorite, in another call, a victim was told that the statute of limitations on your civil legal rights has expired. Examples, by the way, of these false associations made on the part of the debt collectors is on the chart to my left. You'll see there's a suggestion that they're part of the Warrant Services Association and a government task force that didn't actually exist. In addition to the examples on the chart to my right, other examples abound in the complaint. In one case, a defendant told a victim that she had just 15 minutes to decide whether to make a payment on her spouse's debt, and if she elected not to, a warrant for his arrest would be issued immediately. In another case, as outlined in the complaint, one of the defendants arrested today used a false name and identified herself as Chief Investigator Sharon Wright. That defendant told a victim that she was investigating a criminal complaint for an outstanding payday loan. At one point, the victim asked for customer service, and the defendant replied, quote, "Customer service? Ma'am, you're on your way to jail," close quote. When the victim pleaded that she was 8 months pregnant and did not want to go to jail, the defendant replied, quote, "I wouldn't care if you were 9 months pregnant. I have a job to do here," close quote. As the complaint describes, these were not occasional lapses. A campaign of harassment, lies, and threats was the company's very business model. Indeed, the abusive tactics were scripted out, as found in a search, scripted out for the collectors, and that business has now been shut down. Unfortunately, though, there are many, many businesses just like WSA. As I said, this has become something of an epidemic. Query any room full of people, and you will find several who have been on the receiving end of this harassment or who know friends and relatives who have been, and that goes double for certain groups. According to the CFPB, since September 2013, older Americans have submitted more complaints about debt collection than any other financial product or service. The efforts by the FTC and the CFPB to educate consumers, bring enforcement actions, and increase the regulatory focus on this problem have been remarkable and worthy of admiration. Happily, there has been a regulatory crackdown, but there needs to be, when appropriate, a criminal crackdown also. Indeed, earlier this year, the FTC filed a civil suit against this company, WSA and John Williams. Yet shortly thereafter, we allege that Williams launched a new debt collection business engaged in the very same unscrupulous and illegal practices. And so we are far from finished looking at the seedy side of debt collection. It affects too many people. I have reached out to the FTC and the CFPB about taking an even more aggressive approach to this problem, to receive more referrals and to launch more prosecutions. In addition, recently I and others in this office met with a collection of leading consumer advocates to discuss still other ways to protect the public from these kinds of threats and ripoffs. We urge consumers to be careful and to know their rights. It turns out in America, there is not a statute of limitations on your civil rights to be free from abuse. And while we urge consumers to take care, we also urge whistleblowers to come forward, as did one, by the way, who went to the media last week in Chicago, apparently fed up with the way her company was going about collecting supposed debts, as shown on NBC5 in Chicago a few days ago. Let me make a final point. There is also a responsibility on the part of creditors who are casually assigning debts to over-aggressive debt collectors, while perhaps conveniently keeping their heads in the sand about the malicious methods employed. And we are taking a very close look at what the original creditors and the various middlemen are doing, at whether they are cynically offloading the responsibility for collection to crooks and thugs while attempting to maintain plausible deniability. And we will do our best to hold accountable anyone and everyone in the chain of responsibility. Now let me introduce and thank our law enforcement team. First, I am joined here today by our investigative partner in this and so many important cases, the FBI, today represented by Rich Frankel, the special agent in charge of the criminal division here. I want to thank Assistant Director Venizelos, as well as Supervisory Special Agent Darren Keibel, and Special Agents Brian Kaminsky and Timothy Brody for their really great work on this case. I'm also joined here today by Bill Efron, the Director of the Northeast Regional Office of the FTC, which has long been a leader in the fight against consumer fraud. And as I said, my office is committed to a continuing and ongoing partnership with the FTC to ensure we're doing everything in our power to protect ordinary Americans from fraud and abuse. I want to thank all those at the FTC who have helped make today's case possible, including Edith Ramirez, the chair of the FTC, Valerie Verduce, the FTC's criminal liaison, and FTC staff attorney Robin Rock. I'd also like to thank the CFPB for initially referring this matter to our office. And finally, of course, I want to express my appreciation to the career prosecutors who have conducted the investigation leading to today's arrest, Assistant U.S. Attorneys Daniel Tarani and Jennifer Gachiri, as well as Richard Tarlow and Nikki Friedlander, the chiefs of our complex frauds and cybercrime unit. I also want to thank investigator Kevin Song, a criminal investigator in our office, for his important contributions to the case. And now I'm pleased to call to the podium Rich Frankel from the FBI.
Good afternoon. The defendants charged today operated and worked at Williams Scott & Associates, better known to debtors as Warrant Services Association, or WSA. The company conducted the ultimate shakedown using all of their creativity to cheat, lie, and mislead, all in the name of collection. The scheme took advantage of our poorest and most vulnerable citizens from all 50 states, including right here in New York City. There was no warrant squad. They did not work for the government. They couldn't suspend your license or mine, and certainly not their unwitting victims. And no, they didn't have any friends at the FBI. This was nothing but a scam, a total fabrication in order to coerce thousands into paying debts, some real and many others made up. The defendants were bullies with badges. The only problem was their badges were bogus. Some of the highlights of the lies include that they claimed falsely to be affiliated with the Department of Justice and the U.S. Marshals. WSA claimed to work closely with a federal task force that didn't exist. They made up their own legal lingo. WSA recorded their calls and had detailed scripts for nearly every potential interaction that clearly laid out their scheme. Much of that information has been used against them and is included in the complaint unsealed today. One man was threatened with losing his license if he didn't pay immediately, despite the fact that he was unemployed and undergoing hip surgery that same day. When WSA felt the gig was up, the owner, John Williams, shut the business down and reopened it under a new name. The only problem was nothing had changed, the same employees and the same tricks. In reality, they'd tell their victims whatever they thought they needed to hear in order to get paid. I want to thank U.S. Attorney Pete Bharara, who has been an invaluable partner in bringing these cases to justice. Deputy United States Rich Zabel and Assistant U.S. Attorneys Daniel Tarani and Jonathan Cohen. I'd also like to thank the FTC for joining with us. Today is a result of hundreds of hours of work by diligent FBI agents reviewing hundreds of complaints and recordings and conducting dozens of interviews. I'd like to thank Brian Kaminsky, Kurt Durker, Supervisory Special Agent Darren Keibel, and Assistant Special Agent in Charge Patrick Carroll. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, finally, I'd like to call to the podium the left front from the FTC.
Thank you, U.S. Attorney Bharara and Assistant Director Venizelos. The FTC, through our Southeast Region and Criminal Liaison Unit, has worked closely with our law enforcement partners here today. In this case, according to the FTC's civil complaint, the defendants, when contacting consumers, falsely claimed to be affiliated with federal and state agents and members of a government fraud task force, and then bullied consumers into making payments on supposed payday debt loans. Many consumers in this case were victimized twice. First, when they inquired about payday loans online and their personal information was not properly safeguarded, and later when they were harassed and intimidated by defendants to whom they did not owe any money. This case was particularly egregious, and the action taken here today will ensure that the defendants can no longer engage in illegal business practices. Abusive and deceptive debt collection practices, including so-called phantom debt by unscrupulous actors, is a significant problem for consumers. The good news is that the FTC and its law enforcement partners are taking a strong stand against phantom debt collection, as well as other abusive and deceptive debt collection practices and the fraudsters that perpetrate them. Since 2010, the FTC has permanently banned at least 63 entities and individuals from the business of debt collection. Just this year alone, we have brought 10 debt card collection cases, and we have brought 5 phantom debt card collection cases since 2012. We will continue to work closely with our federal and state partners in working to combat this illegal activity. The FTC is also here to help educate consumers, because informed consumers are less likely to fall prey to this kind of activity. We provide a range of useful resources and tips for consumers on how to protect themselves, including some I would like to highlight now. If you receive a call from someone trying to collect a debt, here are a few ways to spot a fake debt collector. The caller may be a fake if he or she is seeking payment on a debt you don't recognize, refuses to give you a mailing address or telephone number, asks for your personal, financial, or sensitive information, or tries to scare you into paying the debt, such as by threatening to have you arrested or reporting you to a law enforcement agency. So if you think the caller may be a fake debt collector, here are some actions you can take. Ask the caller for his name, company, street address, and phone number. Tell the caller you refuse to discuss any debt until you get a written validation notice. This notice must contain the creditor that you owe, the amount of the debt, and your rights under the Federal Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. If the caller refuses to give you any of this information, do not pay. In addition, do not give the caller or confirm your personal, financial, or sensitive information, such as your credit card information, social security number, or bank account information. Third, If you think the debt is legitimate, but the collector calling you is not, contact your creditor. Finally, if you believe you've been targeted by a fake or phantom debt collector, file a complaint with the FTC by visiting the FTC's online complaint assistant or calling 1-877-FTC-HELP. Consumers can visit www.consumer.ftc.gov to view these and other easily accessible tips on how to protect themselves. I'd like to thank Valerie Verduce, the head of the FTC's Criminal Liaison Unit, who is here with us today, for her unit's important work in helping consumers to coordinate on this case on consumers' behalf. I'd also like to thank staff of the FTC's Southeast Region, Rob and Rock, who are litigating the FTC's civil case in this matter. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Happy to take your questions.
Hey, Mr. Frankel, I think you said that after these guys were shut down, that they then reopened. Are they currently running a business somewhere with, when they were arrested, or what's going on?
When they were arrested, they were currently running a business.
What's the name of that business?
We don't have it at this time.
Is that also in Atlanta?
It's in the Atlanta region.
Okay. And are they, 6 of the 7 are in custody now?
At this time, 7 out of 7 are in custody.
Okay, and they'll be in court later today in Atlanta?
I believe so. I'm not sure, but I believe so.
How many victims were here in New York?
A number, I don't know the exact number, but plenty. 6,000 over all 50 states. I don't think they were evenly distributed among the states, but there were enough. Yeah.
You talked about you were looking at possibly bring future cases or look at future criminal prosecutions of abuse and possibly look at change of who's sold the debt. What's possible criminal alternatives?
Yeah, I said we're going to be looking very hard at what people's culpability is all the way up the chain. It doesn't necessarily mean criminal charges. It could mean civil action, regulatory action, and we'd be doing that in conjunction with the FTC in this case and in conjunction with other regulators in other cases. The point is that folks who are offloading their debt need to be careful about how they're doing it, and that law enforcement authorities and regulatory authorities are going to begin to take even a closer look at whether or not people are doing it with a wink and a nod and putting their head in the sand to allow other people to break the law. And although it's not always possible to connect the knowledge of the people who are offloading the debt to the people who are engaging in thuggery to collect, if it's possible, we'll do that. Yeah. I don't think we have that allegation, no. Yeah. I don't think we have that specific allegation. They seem to be targeting a lot of people all over the place, not just in... Yeah, well, I think among the victims were vulnerable folks. I made a reference in my statement to elderly folks, and that's one of the leading complaints made to the CFPB is with respect to debt collection practices. So this is one case with respect to WSA, but there are lots of companies out there, some of whom do a better job of targeting particular vulnerable groups, and some go after some of the communities you're talking about. This one was a little bit more broad-based. Yeah.
Two questions. First, what are the consumer groups that you met with? And the second question is, the three of you gave slightly different descriptions of what these guys were doing. You had said they bought debt for pennies on the dollar and then collected it. Somebody else said these were not real debts at all. They were calling people up and inventing that they owed things. And then somebody else said, or intimated they were real debts, but these guys weren't authorized to collect them. Is it all three?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all of them, and I don't know what the percentages are. And we're sorting through that. As I think I mentioned, there was a search done on the premises, and a lot of the evidence that's contained in the complaint, it's not yet an indictment, is reflected in the complaint. Calls that were recorded were seized, scripts were seized, other documents were seized, and we haven't quite sorted through all that. But it's my understanding that all three of those were the case.
And then what were the groups that you met with?
There's a whole assortment of them. I don't have them off the top of my head. If you call, I think we can give you some of them. Well, I think that people have been on hard times lately, and there are scammers who have become more and more sophisticated. I think it becomes easier to be anonymous and easier to call from locations and seem like you're calling from somewhere else. I think there are a lot of Americans who have more debt than they used to, given the last few years of what has happened in the economy. And people have gotten wise to how to scare people into paying debts and associating themselves falsely with law enforcement. I mean, there are statistics that come out of the FTC and come out of the CFPB and other government organizations that will tell you how big a problem these abusive debt collection practices are. Separate and apart from that, anecdotally, when you go out this weekend, ask people where you are, how many people have gotten calls like this. I think Rich Frankel himself has gotten a call like this. The ADIC, who is not here today, George Venizelos, was telling me last week when we were discussing this case and the takedown of this case that he's gotten calls with respect to debt collection. So it seems to be, friends of mine, members of my family and their friends, it seems to be happening at a more alarming pace and scope and scale than we've seen before. Yeah. I think you can probably get it from one of your colleagues. I don't want to bore them again. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of case that I think could have been handled in virtually any district in the country because there are victims all over the country. As I mentioned in my remarks, the CFPB came to us with a complaint. We've been working with them. We work with the FTC, and they saw, this scam going on, and they knew that we're capable and sophisticated enough to pierce through it and to work on matters that affect people all over the country and then involve following the money. And so I suppose that's why they came to us. Yeah, what's the period of the conspiracy? It's about 5 years. Yeah, I mean, part of our job is to hold people accountable after the fact, and part of our job is to deter people from doing it in the first place. And part of that's part of the reason why we're here. And we hope that you, spend time on your various outlets talking about the problem, and in particular, repeat some of the things that Bill Efron said from the FTC, because the best way to protect against this is for consumers not to fall victim to the shenanigans of people who are calling them on the phone. So a combination of taking people off the street so that they can't commit these crimes, in addition, scaring other people from engaging in this conduct, and equipping everyday ordinary consumers with the knowledge of what their rights are. A combination of those things over time, I think, can do the trick. No, we've been working on this long before that. Yeah. Last question.
Not going to comment on that. It's too real. The only thing I can comment on at this time, because it's going on as we're talking, is that the FBI through the Ligat in the legal attaché in Tel Aviv is working with the Israeli National Police, and we will continue to work with them through the Washington field office on this matter. At this point, I don't want to go into any further details of that assistance or the case itself. What was the purpose this past weekend of the DEA investigating football teams, and what was found?
I direct you to the DEA. You can ask them questions about that. I'm not going to comment. Any questions about that? I think the DEA spokesperson has already talked about that a little bit. I think generally everyone has an interest in making sure that painkillers, among other prescription drugs, are prescribed in accordance with law, because we've seen a lot of pain on the part of a lot of people inside and outside sports leagues, and I'll leave it at that. Great. Thank you.